Hey guys, welcome to Evolution Now, podcast number 24. I'm your host, Damien Chinappi, alongside JJ Wolf. Our guest today is a writer, a director, and producer whose content has seen over 1 million views on his YouTube channel. He's worked along heavyweights in the industry like Ed Helms, the guy from the Hangover series, Mel Gibson, and Mark Wahlberg. Originally from Michigan, he has made the jump to LA, where he is now in post-production on his feature film, Black Spines. It's our absolute pleasure to welcome to the Evolution Now project, Jordon Foss.
Hey, how you guys doing today? Pleasure to meet you, JJ. But pleasure to see you, Damien.
Pleasure to meet you too,
Likewise.
bro. Pleasure to
Likewise.
meet you. So what got you into writing and directing, Jordan?
The ironic answer is actually professional wrestling. I was a 12-year-old kid in seventh grade. I went to a buddy's house on a Friday, and he said, "Hey, is it cool if we watch Friday Night SmackDown?" And I was like, "Isn't wrestling fake?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's the most interesting part about it, is that it's all scripted, it's all a show, but it's some of the best stunts you'll ever see, and they're really putting their lives on the line." And when I was able to accept that part of the fun of writing is understanding that someone is telling you a story, part of the fun of entertainment is letting yourself, put aside your suspense of disbelief. And that's when I really got interested in the idea of, okay, you can really create anything if you're willing to, once again, allow yourself to believe in the fantasy of it. And as I got older, I realized, man, professional wrestling would be a lot better if the writing was a lot better. Not that the wrestlers were bad, it's that the writing had to get better. And I started like trying to write, and this started in high school, just as like me being a silly kid writing, and I used to do a lot of comic book drawing. And when I was a kid too, I used to love to draw characters and so forth. And eventually, once you start writing, you realize the only way to visualize what you write is to learn direction, you know? And then once you learn direction, you realize, man, the only way I can get these things in front of the camera is to produce it. And after a certain point, you become your own writer, your own director, your own producer, because you're trying to figure out how to create that vision into life.
So
Beautifully
that's
said.
awesome. So let me ask you, where does the writing process start for you, Jordan? Is it an idea? Is it an image? Is it an experience? And how do you foster that beginning point to your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I I have to say everything starts with an idea, right? And the inception of an idea can come from many places. Sometimes I'll see a movie, I'm watching a film, and I can say, hey, there's something within this shot or this moment or this scene that is really pulling me into wondering, like, I wonder where this story could go. And I start spinning my own story out of an idea that they've created. And I'm one of those people who believes that no idea is original. All of us are really kind of telling the same stories over and over again in our own unique ways from our perspectives, right? And once again, the moment you can let yourself be derivative, you can also allow yourself to be original too. You have to know what are the things that inspired you to even want to tap into why you're telling your story in the first place. And then from there, I always start with that idea. I love to write down a single sentence or paragraph of what I think the story is about. Then I write my treatment, which is maybe that page long version of it. Sometimes I've written treatments that are 12 pages long, because you just got to keep writing until you tell every part of the story that's in your mind. And once you have that treatment written down, you can pretty much start your screenplay. In my mind, it becomes a situation where you are just trying to put down as much as you possibly can at once so that when you have to come back to it a second time, the third time, the 100th time, you can still come back to that same skeleton, that blueprint, that idea that inspired you in the first place. And it'll continue to inspire you every single time. Because if it's a good idea, you'll keep thinking it's a good idea. If it's a bad idea, you'll forget it the next day, the next moment.
I love that. Like a good idea will always stick with you, for sure, for sure. And Damien, go for it.
Yeah, I love what you said, Jordan. The first time, the third time, the 10th, the 100th time. Because I've known you for years, I know you're on a path of self-mastery in writing and directing, and I love that. And the psychological frame that allows people to trudge on past the point where most quit is so important, especially for artists. We have to be like athletes, where it's this weird balance of you have to be unemotional about showing up, but use your emotions when you do show up.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting thing where you have to repeat the same tasks, rewriting, editing. You have to repeat the same tasks with a purpose, master this craft. I don't think you ever can. That's the beauty of it. And with presence of mind. So do you have any tips for staying present to up and coming writers or directors?
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny is what you just mentioned reminded me of one of the best moments on film that I can think of in the last few years. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's last film, there's a great moment where they're shooting their Western, right? You know, the two, it's Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He's sitting on the set of that Western with Timothy Olyphant. And they do that scene where they are literally filming Timothy Olyphant's close up and they're pulling out. And then they realize, wait a minute, we have to do the take again. And the camera pushes back in, it resets itself. And then it does the take all over again the exact same way. And the real truth is the only way you can get through the end of something and continue to do it over and over again is to stay in the moment. Don't cut, don't pull yourself out, don't beat yourself up. Do that after, but stay in the moment. You know, we like to call it, you know, you mentioned sports, staying in the zone, right? When you're in the zone, stay there. If you're in a writing space, stay there. Don't even look to the guy to your right and tell them the story you're writing. Stay on the page, stay in the moment, because there's going to be a moment when you're out of it eventually, and it's going to be harder to get back into that zone. So taking yourself out is the ultimate way to cripple yourself creatively. Stay in the zone.
I love that, staying in the moment. And that's the thing people say, like, be in the moment, be present. And I've done a lot of thinking about what that is. And, you know, thinking is the death of emotion when you're on a film set. Like you do, but I've really come to realize you do all your character work, you create your emotional triggers, you know the story arc, all that stuff. But when it comes time to film, this last film I worked on, I threw everything out and it came back to me because the moment, you can't prepare for it, you can't force it, you can't control it. All you can do is meet it. And you meet it with relaxation and trust. And then in that process, as you're relaxed and you're trusting yourself and your actors and directors, then you can really do that exploration, that curiosity, and get those on-set discoveries that you can't create beforehand. They happen like a sort of alchemy on set.
Absolutely.
So well
Absolutely.
said. The onset discoveries. I love that. And yeah, Jordan, when you stay on the page, you stay in the moment. And I wanted to respond earlier, just call it out. You had said like nothing is original, but when we accept that, then in a way we create the space for originality to come through. And it was such a I think there's so much truth in paradoxes, just like that one. Um,
Absolutely.
would you talk a little bit about the relationship between writing a script and then directing it on set? You've kind of touched on
Absolutely.
this a little bit, but how is each facet similar and how are they different, the writing and directing?
You know, tapping into what you just said about derivative and giving yourself space for originality, your script is a blueprint, right? You know, when you write that screenplay, when you take that writer's pages, it is a blueprint for yourself, your crew, your talent, everyone who's showing up on a day of set. It's their ability to say what they perceive out of that page, right? And the best thing about being a writer and a director is that I also allow myself as the writer of the script to throw out my page if I need to and start fresh on the moment when you're there to create something new. Something I discovered while shooting Black Spines is how often that, hey, when I wrote this line, I was trying to convey an idea, but now I'm surrounded with collaborative, talented artists, and you have a perspective on that same idea that I don't. So I want you to think about just the idea. I learned from Catherine Bigelow when I worked on her film Detroit. She would give the talent, the actors, their pages on the day. Did not see the script prior to the day of the filming. She would only give them their sides on the day. And it was because she did not want them to be like off book. She wanted them to have an idea of what the scene was about. So when they showed up, they only could rely on themselves to continue the scene. They had to pull from a place of authenticity and truth to continue to manifest that scene. So the relationship between writer and director is more so the writer is giving you an idea and the director is helping you find the truth of that idea. What's really the truth of this idea? What is the real thing that we're going to hold on to when this page is all said and done? And every once in a while, I look back on a page versus, where we're at in the edit, and I realize, oh man, this is really genuinely, transformed and manifested a completely new version of itself. And I didn't realize it was going to get to this place. But, they always say you're going to write it first as a script. You're going to write it a second time when you're doing the movie. You're going to write it a third time in post. And it very much so is reality because like any story, when it goes from myself to you, JJ, to you, Damien, that story is going to change a couple times based on your perspective of that story and what you held on to when you first were given that idea. So it's no different, with a writer to a director. Someone's giving you an idea, and it's your job to continue to find the truth of that idea for yourself.
Hmm. wow, finding the truth of that idea as it emerges and evolves on its own in the directing process. I haven't heard that concept before, but I love that you write it 3 times. You write it when you write it, you write it when you direct it, and then you write it in the edit. And I can definitely relate with that. Absolutely. What do you think, Damien?
No, I mean 100%. Like so much, so much of the work that you do that makes you effective on set goes unseen. It's that time in isolation that allows you to try some things and to fail and to get a sense of who you are and what buttons you need to push to get those emotions up. Because let's face it, everything about film in terms of creation is emotional. The story is emotional. The actors are emotional, and that intertwinement of the story from page to screen, there's emotions between collaborators. And the fact that Catherine Bigelow would just give out sides on the day, I mean, talk about a level of self-trust. I think you can't be and I like the word effective.
Mhm.
Effective artist, effective writer, effective director. You can't be effective if you don't trust yourself. You know, you can get lucky, but who wants that? You
Yeah.
know, if you're going in to have surgery, you want the surgeon to get lucky and remove your appendix or whatever. There's a certain degree of security that comes in just showing up and repeating that process over and over again. So you get to the point where you do trust yourself. So, Jordon, what's your style as director for people that haven't worked with you when you're working with an actor?
I think what you just tapped onto is the most important part of any director actor relationship: trust. You cannot convey a scene, you cannot get what you want out of a scene if you do not trust the person that is capturing it with you. And of course, the partners you have in that scene with you, right? Every breakdown I've ever seen when it comes to like, hey, I don't like this line, or I don't like my costume, or I don't like this scene, it's because they really didn't trust me to convey the scene in a way that they felt comfortable in. Or more so specifically, hey, this seems really, really dangerous. And it's because they don't trust the stunt guy to make sure that they're not going to, get injured throughout the process. Right. And every single part of the process has to come back to that level of trust. And if it ever stops, if it ever slows down, you have to reform that trust. You have to do whatever it takes, whether it's doing your own little version of a psychiatry meeting with your actor. Like, you got to form that trust with them. So what I love to do, and I consider it very much some emotional manipulation. But what I love to do is that I love to establish trust with you by bringing my own barriers down, right? Hey, I know what this scene is about for me. So what I'm going to tell you is a story from my own perspective about my own, experience in life. And that's the emotion that I'm actually putting into the scene when I'm sitting down with you. And now you understand why I'm here and doing this scene with you, because there's a place within me that it comes from. And I just gave you something about myself that is very much so a vulnerability, right? And if I can be vulnerable with you, then you have to ask yourself why you can't be vulnerable with me and why you don't trust me to be vulnerable. And now you have to form trust with someone. So a big part of creating a relationship with anyone is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, right? And also allowing yourself to be true to like why you're doing it the way you're doing it, even if that reason is something selfish, right? I've often told people, hey, I appreciate your selfish reason for being here. Even if your reason to be here is a paycheck, at least I know like what's motivating you to show up here today, so I can better help you also get to that goal. If your goal is to get to the end of the day and to like work your ass off to get there so you can get that paycheck, well, guess what? My job is to make sure we don't go into overtime. My job is to make sure that we're here and we get those shots and we get out of here as soon as possible so you can go home to where you want to truly be, and that's okay. Sometimes the selfish reason is, hey, I really, really have been looking for this role. I've been starving for an opportunity to give this kind of character. And what I always say to that actor is, now, when you wanted this role, did you want it because it's something that is your wheelhouse and you can bring this to the character? Like, hey, this is something that's my bread and butter. Or is it because this is the kind of role that you never get and you finally get to challenge yourself? And I'm always looking for that challenge that you're really trying to accomplish and how I can help you, cross that barrier, cross that challenge, that bridge. And that's also about forming trust with one another. You have to trust that I'm going to help you get the goal that you came to receive. And setting those types of goals are very, very important, especially whether it's the day, the week, the month, the entire project as a whole, making sure that we accomplish those goals together.
What's so evident about you, Jordon, when you speak is how much you love this game, how the totality of your being gets funneled into it. And there's an elegance and a simplicity with you saying, I tell a story, I convey an idea. And that's what I love. It just shows you're all in on this thing, and you really have to be. And the wisdom that you take in your life, it comes through in your art. And so there's a by being able to do that, it creates a certain sense of like a feeling of home and security that to really be vulnerable, you have to feel secure in the fact that you're able to do that right there in the moment with the actor so succinctly and so cleanly just speaks to the level of care and dedication that you have put into your craft. And so that being said, when I say the word craft, what comes to mind for you?
Paint, paintbrush, an easel, a canvas. You know, craft is the ability to take a needle and to thread it, right? Craft is the ability to take a wrench and to, move that lug nut and put together an engine, right? Craft is the ability to take your two hands and to manifest something with it, right? Which is, I think, why a lot of people feel talentless, because a lot of the craft necessary for our work does not require our hands, it requires our head, right? It requires our heart. And that makes them feel like I don't have the same craft that others do, right? Which is the ability to use my mind and my eyes, my hand-eye coordination to manifest a piece of artwork.
JJ, that was amazing. At first I thought you said pain, and I was like, which I'll touch on later, but I'm curious. And we'll jump into that last facet of like you can't put your hands on something, you have to use this. But JJ, throw that to you. When you hear the word craft, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I do love that. It immediately makes me think about my relationship to what I do, because I do a lot of editing and I do a lot of admin and marketing and visual design on my laptop and writing, and so sometimes it really feels like I'm not really doing much with my hands. I'm just sitting doing this, right? And recently I was doing some work on a property that I'm helping develop, and I was really just using my muscles. I got a few cuts on my fingers and hands, and I really felt like I was in my body. But yeah, I mean, whether it's a craft that's primarily cognitive and with, driven by the heart, the intuition, the sentiments, the desire to allow the story to emerge and evolve, or it's a physical craft, like you said, threading the needle, and pushing that needle through the fabric. I think that, yeah, I mean, when I hear the word craft, I recognize that there are both, very physical crafts, and then there are some that are very mental crafts. And I don't think either one is better than the other or more valuable than the other. They both demand a certain amount of like full human effort, full human potential. So yeah, that's what I think of when I think about craft. And I loved hearing what you said, Jordon, about your directing style. And to me, it seems like if I were to like attempt to in some way try to simplify what you had said, I would say that your craft is your directing style is about authenticity and also vulnerability and really being present with your team and with the actors, and getting on the level with one another so that you're working together. And it's beautiful to hear that. There's sometimes you hear stories of like a Spielberg or somebody that's like way down the line in their craft and they're just barking orders, maybe. No offense, Spielberg, but it's nice to hear that you're enjoying the collaborative process where you have a vision that you are showing up to set because your intention is to get that vision on camera, while also being open, especially because you're often the writer of what you're directing, being open to dropping a page or changing something day of, and also allowing the actor to bring life and evolve the true sentiment of what story wants to come forth in that moment.
Damien tapped on something a little bit ago where he referenced the idea of, when you bring people together, you kind of make a home, right? You're trying to give them that experience that is like, creating a place of safety, right? And what I want to tap on with that idea is that think about when you're in your own home life, who are you most willing to be vulnerable around, right? It's your parents, your siblings, your loved ones, your missus, your wife, your girlfriend, your dog. These are the things in your own home that you're most willing to be vulnerable with, right? And when I get together with talent, the first things that I try to do is to pull them aside, just, whoever's the scene partners of that moment, and help them find not really what the scene is about alone, but also where are the memories that you two have as characters in the past that are not on the page, right? Where are the times in your history as actors, as talent, as characters, before this scene was shot? What memories do you guys have with each other? So, for example, on Black Spines, I had a brother sister combination. So I would sit with them and I pull them aside and I'd say, "Hey, which one of you, which one of you does the cooking? Which one of you likes to cook?" And they go, "Oh, I think that's a dad thing. I think our dad liked to cook." I'm like, "All right, right. So what did dad cook? What's like dad's favorite meal?" And someone's like, I guess steak and potatoes." I'm like, "Right, right. But you're vegan, aren't you?" And they say, "Oh, right. Yeah, I am vegan." And that kind of always upset me because dad never really made anything for me. And it's like, right. So you probably have a little bit of, uh, bad blood with your sibling over this fact that he got the preference that you didn't get. And it's like, right, yes, and then you lean on that and you keep forming new relationships and new memories. And what ended up happening is that those memories, those ideas that we sat together and created in a moment were things that were now being pulled into the scene because they can pull on this now, this experience, this memory, this idea that they formed together just by, being vulnerable with one another. And I think that's a really big part of, once again, how you're able to let the emotionality of a scene come through, without having to force that emotionality. Um, Big fan of Ridley Scott. I'm a huge fan of Ridley Scott. Love his films, love his, all of his work throughout his entire filmography. It has some of the best shots you'll ever see in a movie. Um, and something I discovered about Ridley Scott and his age is that when he had to do All the Money in the World and he had to do the reshoots to replace Kevin Spacey, he said in his mind it was the easiest thing he ever had to do because all the shots were the same. He was going to just go back out there and get the exact same frames that are, the ones that had Kevin Spacey in them and replace them without even second thinking them. And it's because in his mind, he has honed his craft to a place where he no longer has to second guess what kind of shot it is or how he's going to frame a character. No, the character was already framed. The shot was already shot. I'm not changing that because I've perfected my craft to a place where this is exactly the kind of frame you go to get for this type of moment. And that's the kind of stuff that, the better you get at honing your craft as a filmmaker, the easier it gets also to kind of, once again, fill those narrative gaps that you find yourself in when you're in post. Like, hey, I already know I need to go back out and get this master wide, and it doesn't need to require, talent, stunts, or anything. I just need to get body doubles walking, away from frame to create this kind of motion and movement and a feeling. And that frame doesn't change whoever is in the frame because the frame is still, once again, just like when Bob Ross paints a vista, he's going to give you a feeling of that serenity that comes with it every single time. So nonetheless, it's always important to find vulnerability, find reality, but more importantly, you also get to hone your craft better every single time you go out there and know exactly what frames you need to get that emotionality.
And I love that the memories the characters share. That's how you craft a scene. That's craft. That's craft in a craft. And I love that attention to detail because, and I think of the word craft. I think it's the ability to sculpt your mind. For you sculpt your mind in a way that you have accessibility of emotion with precision in a practical way. And what you just demonstrated was a very practical way to take your experiences, your learned experiences, your wisdom, and your emotion, and to translate it to other artists. Because at the end of the day, art to me is about communication, clarity, precision, and depth of communication, whether it's of an idea, of an emotion, of a memory, of a certain time in history. Where oh, he might be bored in the plane. He might be out.
I might have to.
Okay, this part um, but no, like what you're talking about is really doing that hands-on work that it's like, oh, let's get the frame and go and get it, do a different take. And that's what when I hear you talk, I'm like, man, I'm in class right now, sitting listening to you because there's so much stuff that me as an actor, I'm like, man, there's practical things that I can go on my next set and go, hey, we're brother and sister. Who did the cooking growing up? What was your favorite meal? And it's those small, and they're not small moments.
But you know your
They're
sister's favorite dress, right? You know your sister's favorite meal. You know what kind of gift to give your sister when it's Christmas because you know what kind of person she is. And when you're an actor, You're expected to have that kind of love and appreciation for an individual, but in a moment, in a day, and without any of the years prior that it was required to have that relationship with that character, for that moment in a day. And that's the tough part, right? So that's why it's my job. I'm a big, obviously I learned a lot from actors, Stanislavski method, the Meisner method, and understanding how you guys use acting methods also help me understand how to communicate with you guys, right? So instead of telling you, hey, I need you to pull from this experience in your life and create this feeling for me on camera, I just know what kind of questions to ask you to get you to that emotional place, If this scene is about your best friend who may be, who's dying in the hospital, I'm not going to just say, hey, I need you to pull on the saddest memory of your life. I'm going to bring up, hey, who's your best friend? Okay, JJ. Tell me about JJ. What do you love about JJ? Tell me a little bit about, one of your favorite times that you guys hung out together. Now tell me what would happen if something terrible happened to JJ and you had to rush to the hospital to be there with him right now. I'm not gonna just tell you find the emotion. I'm gonna help you find that emotion and get you there as close as possible. Because once you're there close as possible, by the way, the camera's already running. They've already hit record. The sound's already, sounds is speed. So at that point, now you just got to walk in front of the camera and let that emotionality come through, and let it be once again like a funnel, or maybe not a funnel is the right word, but nonetheless, you have to be the hose head. You get to be the thing that lets it out actually. So yeah.
Channel.
Speaking on that, I saw this quote and I put it on my whiteboard. It said, "The internal life is like a river, and that words are the canoe that float on the river. So if you get that river right, then the words and the physicality will be in their right place." Now, there is something to be said about built physicality, like a character that could have, a herniated disc or something. But in terms of it's not surface level, but it's like the layer one of like the baseline emotions that you're playing with outside of the individualized character work that would be for that character, getting that internal life right. And what's beautiful about that is the more you can focus on your powers of concentration, the stronger you can effectively communicate with clarity. And I love that. It's in a lot of respects, it's a single player game, the work an artist has to do. It has to be done in isolation. So you need to know thyself. And I'm a big believer in, if you can bring excitement to your work, your day-to-day work, the consistent chain of actions every day in your craft, if you can do that by yourself, get excited, feel it, use it, and embody it, that when you get in front of other people, your power amplifies tenfold.
100%.
Absolutely.
Concentration is absolutely important. You can always tell when someone's distracted, especially in a scene, right? You can also tell when someone's giving a line that's not from a real genuine place. It's visible. You have to be willing to once again lock in, like that zone I was mentioning. You got to lock in and you got to be able to concentrate very clearly on where this is coming from for you and why you're doing it this way. And kind of tapping also on what you said about the river and the canoe metaphor. um, I firmly believe that once again, guys, film is a visual medium, right? So the visual of your facial reaction, the actions of physicality that you take are the real statement that needs to be processed by the audience. Your dialogue is the exclamation point on that statement. It's the question mark on that statement. It's the punctuation of the scene itself. Okay. But you have to be able to construct that statement visually before you can let the dialogue finish that statement off. Right. And that's, once again, understanding for yourself, myself as a writer and a director, it always is about the physical action and the visual metaphor that has to be conveyed first and foremost. And then helping you as an actor understand what is the punctuation of your dialogue, where is it coming from, and what you want that dialogue to say on that visual statement as a whole. Choosing settings is very important. Where you set a scene is really what you're saying about the scene itself, right? There's a difference between us having a conversation right now in our homes versus a conversation in the Louvre. And you don't even need to, right? You can already get in a sense of what that meaning is and that statement is without me having to convey the feeling, because it gives you a certain type of aura, gives you a certain type of, once again, experience that is different than every other one. Just like, if, by the way, we're having this conversation at a bus stop. Now we're a lot more hardworking blue collar, right? We sound a lot more down to earth. We sound a lot more like, it's that daily life struggle that comes with, where you set a location.
I love how connected those two metaphors are, that concept of where you set the scene being so much of what is being said, because it's show don't tell. It's a visual medium, as you said. And then relating to the canoe metaphor, for instance, for example, is like an actor perhaps trying to get the right facial expressions, if they actually just hone their inner state, the current of the river, into the sad or happy or anticipation or furious, whatever that is, that emotion underneath, the facial expressions will happen naturally as a result of tuning into that deep undercurrent of emotion. The river, the canoe will just naturally follow those emotions, just like if you set a scene at the Louvre or a bus stop or a firehouse or a coffee shop. Each one of these places is already saying so much, and then gives the context for something more to come through it. It's so cool to hear about you, the way that you direct. And Damien was looking forward to this conversation. He told me this is going to be a great time. I trust Damien a lot, and I'm also just blown away in the experience, because you've got those notches on your belt, man. I can tell you've been behind the camera working with actors so much. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about how has your voice, both as a writer and a director, evolved since you first set out in this industry?
Well, I mentioned obviously my love for professional wrestling and how it kind of spurred me creatively, but truthfully, and Damien, you know this about me, what really got me to understand my creative voice was the experiences that I had in life. My brother passed away when I was 17 in a car accident. And my brother was my role model growing up. A lot of things that I did, he played football, I played football. The kind of man I wanted to be was like the kind of man my brother was, right? And when he passed, what I also discovered was I understood grief now. I understood melancholy, I understood, also this need for justice, this need for vengeance, because, the person that killed my brother got away with it. He drove off that night. And what that small experience, and I don't want to call it small, it was massive for me, but that experience in my life, because we're made up of moments, all of our lives are made up of these moments, eventually spun into me making a Batman fan film, because I really finally understood this character that I enjoyed watching. I actually understood what he felt now. There's a great line in Batman v Superman where Bruce Wayne says, "I'm older now than my father ever was." And that's an experience that I understand now, because I'm older now than my brother ever was. And that's what life is about. Like, you form your voice through those really hard things. Art always comes from adversity. And when you face adversity and you find yourself on the other side of it, you also find yourself with an experience on that adversity that now you can actually convey to other people and tell them what it means to you and how it affected you and how it changed you. And when I look at the best work I've put out there, it's always when I leaned on something that I very truly experienced and I knew very clearly what I was trying to convey out of that emotion. Um, and there's a reason why my fan films are about Batman losing Robin, because it's about losing that brother in arms, that partner, that comrade, that person that in the day helps you form your identity and helps you understand who you are truly meant to be, which is this hero. And I think a lot of young men, especially, need those hero narratives. There's a lot of young men who grow up without a father figure, who grow up without a proper role model, and they need to understand from that character, that story, what is necessary of you as a man to continue to grow and to become a successful individual and really shape the world for a better place. Something I learned about storytelling is, um, we all understand this idea of the hero's journey, right? But when I say the hero's journey, I specifically mean, the call to action, the crossing of the threshold, the seeking of the sword and the stone, the magical elixir, that mentor, magician character. These are classic tropes within the hero's journey. But the unspoken most important one is the final step, which is the hero must sacrifice himself to make himself or the world a better place. That's the most important part of any hero's journey. They have to be willing to give something up to make themselves, even if the world is broken, they can still fix themselves. Or if they're lucky enough, if they're great enough of a hero like Superman, they can make the world a better place. And that's what we all want to do. We all want to leave this world knowing that we left it a little bit better than we came in. And that's the kind of stuff that can only come from, once again, living life, right? And understanding what in your creative voice you want to convey to other people. You want to hopefully convey to them, this is how I hope we can make the world a better place.
Thank you for sharing. There's so much in that. I'm at a loss for words. Damien, would you like to jump in?
No, I mean, it's great. I think me and Jordan both love Batman so much. If you were to run into Batman in real life, you would be scared shitless. He's not a nice guy. There's that quote where he says, like, the reason why I'll beat Clark is deep down, he's a good guy. Deep down, I'm not. So having a villainous energy, at least in my experience, because I journal, I'm very introspective. There were periods during 2023 where I just felt like a villain, very venomous, poisonous, like just nasty. Although I didn't let that out. And I had the villain energy, but I led with the warrior or the hero. And that's what Batman is to me. He is a bad motherfucker. Like, he will maim you, cripple you, but he's doing it to make the world a better place. It's the play of opposites. And I think that's why he appeals to so many people. He's this paradox. He has all the money in the world. He can do anything he wants, yet he chooses to train his body and mind to fashion himself, to craft himself, if you will, into an individual that can make a difference against an insurmountable amount of evil. And I love that, being able to go into the storm night after night, despite having all the greatest things the world can offer. And it's that path of the hero to develop himself through a series of deaths and rebirths, which is something we've talked about on this podcast a number of times. When earlier Jordan said, I asked him, what is craft? I thought he said pain. And that's why I went, oh, that makes sense to me. It's painful to sculpt your mind. You're removing useless parts of yourself to become something greater. And you have to do it again and again and carve and whittle. And it's like, why wouldn't you do that? Because it is painful. And I think the more you can go through those trials and tribulations, those losses, those griefs, not only do you unlock certain colors that you can paint a canvas like a script or a stage with, you're able to relate to people, because we all go through that. We all eventually will. But I think the character you develop in those moments of isolation that really allow you to tap into your power are essential to becoming who you're meant to be. And without that, you can't give the type of performances, you can't write the type of scripts, you can't sing the types of songs that make people stop in their track and get swept up with enough inspiration to say, you know what? I need to go out and do this. I need to embark on my own hero's journey to become that artist. So that being said, when inspiration hits you, Jordan, can you describe it? What do you feel?
Absolutely.
What do you think? What do you do?
I drop everything. First of all, I just straight up drop everything. I immediately pick up, my pen, my phone, my laptop, whatever is closest to me, and I immediately start writing it down. And that's the first step to getting past that hurdle of like, self-doubt, right? Is willing to let yourself be, a bad writer, right? Hey, I don't know if this is the greatest idea in the world. I don't know if this is, the most derivative idea in the world, but I'm going to allow myself to write it down and treat it as if it's the greatest idea I've ever had, and give it the time and respect that it needs to just be put on paper and to become something, right? One of the greatest conversations I've had with a friend is this idea of, if you say something that doesn't exist, does it still exist because you've made it real by stating it? But it's the manifestation rule, right? If I say there's an alien invasion, does that make it real? No. But at the same time, by stating it, it has become a little bit more real, right? By allowing it to exist in your mind, you've also allowed it to become something that can exist in the first place. And that's a huge part of everything. I agree, by the way, on the nature of pain, and art through adversity is the one thing I love to say the most. I've given you my art through adversity speech, Damien, and it's this idea that, hey, if you look at some of the greatest pieces of artwork created in history of humankind, they're created during times of tumultuous pain and struggle and strife, right? You know, the French Revolution, the Italian Renaissance, the Dark Ages, um, even, you know, things that relate to religion. You know, their religion is constantly, you know, in a war with one another about what is truly the meaning of humankind. And there's art that is crafted from that battle. And art can only come from allowing yourself to A, experience adversity, and B, willing to communicate that adversity to others. And allowing it to, you know, a lot of things in life we like to, you know, repress, right? So just like an idea, you want to repress that idea. You want to think, oh, that's a dumb idea. I can't tell anybody about this. You don't have to tell anyone about it, but you have to allow it to be real to yourself. And you have to allow yourself to, you know, acknowledge it and put it down on paper or make it real in its own kind of way. And that's the first step with anything.
Mm. That is the first step. Have you heard of the Kabbalion and the Hermetic principles?
Mm-mm.
It's this little book. It's authored sort of anonymously. The name of the author is by the Three Initiates. I think it was published about 100 years ago. But there's just a long history of Hermetic philosophy. But one of the pillars is sort of the all is mind, that we live in a mental construct and a mental universe. And so when you brought up, saying there's an alien invasion, does that make it true? No, but it makes it slightly more true than it was before by giving it words, by putting it out there, by there's an idea, a concept. Did the three of us produce the most famous Netflix series ever to be produced? Maybe, but it hasn't happened yet.
Manifestation is massive. Manifestation is the most important part of everything that we do, guys. You know, because here's the thing. Uh, we're all inherently crazy for choosing this craft. We're literally going into a craft that is about manifesting things that do not exist. That's the craziest thing in the world, right? To go into a business where the whole intent is to make a world that is not our own. And that, you know, when you explain to somebody, yeah, I go out every day and I put on another uniform and I pretend to be somebody else, they send you to a loony bin, right? But reality is that you are bending reality, right? You are manifesting a new reality every single time. So you have to continue to manifest at all times. Every time I start a new project, I write exactly what I'm trying to manifest out of that project on my wall so I can look at it every day right above my desk. And at the same time, I also just say it out loud all the time. If you ask me, Jordan, when you started Black Spines, why did you do it? I'd say to make $9 million because that's the check that I wrote in my mind. And every single time I say I'm going to sell this movie, it's going to be selling for $9 million. That's the magic number I put on it. It's an arbitrary number. But every single time I say it, now I get, guess what? Every time I go into a meeting and they say, Jordan, what do you think this is worth? I get to say, it's $9 million. Whether or not it is, that's up for them to decide. But I know for me, in my mind, it's 9 million. And I that's the thing. Just like when Jim Carrey wrote that check for himself and put it in his wallet, he manifested, right? And what did he do? He cashed it. So you have to manifest every single part of it. You know, Damien, when we did Nightmare, every single day I would say, I'm making the greatest Batman movie that's ever been made. I'm going to tell the definitive Batman story. I'm going to make a better fan film than any fan film that's ever been created, you know? And what ended up happening is we made a wonderful story. And now I find myself, 6 years later, realizing that the highest levels of, you know, this medium with The Batman by Matt Reeves is touching on so many elements that we share in common. Because what ends up happening is whether or not it's intentional, whether or not Matt Reeves ever saw our fan film, the same intention was set, which is to tell the best version of this story that possibly can. And now you share something in common with them, whether or not it was intentional. And it's just because the intentions are the same. You know, the intention is to tell the very best version of it that you can tell. And those things end up coming across in so many similar ways. Um, Black Spines for me, I wanted to make a throwback. You know, I wanted to make a throwback to um, horror thrillers from the 80s and 90s. I really wanted to make an old school slasher. Like I used to love growing up watching when I was, a 13-year-old hanging out with my buddies. Those types of movies that you weren't supposed to watch, right? And what I ended up realizing after I got into post and I'm watching other films, I realized I put all those same tropes and beats into my film, intentionally or not, because these are the things that I, in the day, associate with this idea. And, that manifestation of trying to create something in this type of way, you're going to end up realizing a lot of other people are trying to create it for that same reason. And you're going to have a lot of things in common. And that's not a bad thing. A lot of us always kind of are afraid of not being unique enough. But the reality is, you're going to be unique just by conveying who you are into your art, right? There's only one Damien Chinappi. There's only one JJ Wolf. There's only one Jordon Foss. So allowing yourself to continue to manifest those best versions of yourselves, saying it out loud, putting it forth, manifesting it through your craft, it eventually you will be the unique voice that it is exactly meant to be, right?
And it's always worth the investment in time. I'm like 10 years into this game of acting, and so many things that I worked on the last feature film I worked on, Final Recovery, shot out of Flint. I found things coming up, and it's like there was a maturation in my craft where I could be super personable in the makeup chair and just making people laugh and giggling, and then 5 minutes later, I could put my head down, take a couple deep breaths, and get so deep into a scene, and I was like, this feels nice. Like that confidence, true confidence is quiet, and it's often misunderstood because it doesn't need to explain itself. When you go and watch it back, you'll go, oh, I see what he was doing. And I know, Jordan, you're on a similar track with that. And I want to say, in terms of Nightmare, a couple things where I did have some squabbles with the suit. I was like, oh, I don't know, the ears blue, blah blah blah. But looking back, where I was wrong, and the humility that you unlock in the places that you're wrong adds to that craft and just being a more well-rounded person. Because I think it's aged really well, and it's a learning opportunity. But the important thing, and I heard Brad Pitt say this, he's something like, I don't know if any of this matters. It probably doesn't. It's not even the destination that matters. It's the people you do things with that matters. Because we shared a love for Batman and shared a connection for creation and storytelling. And that was like 6, 7 years ago. And every time we talk, it feels like no time has passed. And that's the thing. Me and JJ, we met on a 48-hour film festival. So it really, I don't think you choose this. I think it chooses you when you get lucky enough to go, I need to do this. And look, it's easy to tap out because it's an industry that can still discriminate. Like too big, you're too round, whatever. But to those of us that stay in it and keep swimming, like the people you meet, like it's such a strong bond because you can look at someone and go, man, I know you've been through some shit. I know you've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours in the dark, in isolation, behind your computer or at your desk or on a stage. And like, you don't need to say anything, but you just know like what they've been through. Like the artist has to earn those lines on their face, and they should be worn like not battle scars, but like kind of like battle scars.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. You really need to wear your scars, especially because a lot of people just straight up don't know you. And they're going to assume that you're the idiot in town, right? They're going to just treat you like you're someone they have to lecture and show you how to do every single step of the way. So you have to really show those scars and be willing to show your scars and be angry about those scars, even if you need to be, so that they know, hey, this person really does have experience and a voice, and I have to respect that voice. There's one of the funniest experiences I had when I did Father Stew with Mark Wahlberg, Mel Gibson. So that was my fifth film. Okay. And someone came up to me and they're like, Jordan, I got to tell you, man, you're doing a really great job for a first time producer. And I was like, no, this is actually my fifth movie. You just haven't seen my other work. But if you want to watch it, here's where you can find it. And the look on his face turned because that's the thing. Everybody's going to look at you and think this is your first time on the job and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, you know, until they can see and you bear your scars visibly for them and you tell them out loud, hey, this isn't the way to we do it. This is how it's got to be done instead, you know? And it's okay. Look, it's okay to bare your teeth every once in a while. A lot of people like to call me the junkyard dog, because I got a loud bark and I got a mean bite, you know. But at the same time, that's also this nature of like, if you're an independent, if you're scrappy, if you're trying to make it in this industry on your own, you have to be. right? And eventually what you end up creating is this, hopefully like the Iron Giant, this beautiful scrapyard of art that you can be very protective of and say out loud, like, hey, I was here, I made this, I'm a part of this, and this is a part of me now. And they eventually start coming to the junkyard to see it. They don't discover it, they come looking for it because they know this is where they can come find it. And that's the real, true, genuine, goal of any artist is to be the person that they come seeking out, right? You want to feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, where you're out there chopping wood and the helicopter has to land just to come get you because they need you so badly. Like that's the real dream of every artist, which is that people respect you enough to come to you seeking your art. And eventually, maybe you've got your Taj Mahal underneath you, right? And what has the Taj Mahal been in the day? A burial place for a man's wife, right? The artist laying his heart bare and for all to see. That is what in the day you can give to the world is the ability to come see you for who you truly are.
Mm, mm. Coming back to authenticity, and then they come to seek you, junkyard dog.
Absolutely.
Care to share any more about your experience, how you got into that position, how that project came up, what it was like to be a producer on a film with Wahlberg and Gibson?
I got very lucky. I'll say it very, from the top. I'm very, very lucky in life. I was born with a silver spoon up my ass. So that alone helped me a bunch where others didn't. My dad was a car dealer. And because he was a car dealer, I could afford to go be broke for a couple of years of my life being an artist. And I have to say that because a lot of artists aren't afforded that opportunity, right? Which is, hey, sometimes you might have to sleep in your car a couple times to like get through the night to get you to that next day on set. And what I really want to say most of all, and this is the big thing that helped me a lot, was realizing, okay, the opportunity that I want the most in life isn't just going to be tossed to me like a bone. It's not going to come to me. So I have to go looking for it. And more than anything, I have to manifest it myself. So before I ever got the call for Father Stew, I made a film called Coffee and Kareem with Netflix. And that was a movie that I found on the blacklist. Like I went to a website full of uh, a bunch of, the blacklist is a website for writers who don't have managers, agents that don't have representation. So it's your opportunity to put your story on a site that allows for anyone in the industry to come find it looking for it, right? So I knew at the time, in 2014, I was looking for a movie that could be shot in Detroit, Michigan, my hometown. And I found this script. I went to my employer at the time. I went to my dad and I said, hey guys, give me 12.5K each, so $25,000, we can option the script. And I think I can take this script to, at the time I thought Seth Rogen. And really I was talking out of my ass. Like, I don't know Seth Rogen. I don't know how to even get to Seth Rogen. But that's how funny the script was. I knew it made me laugh. I knew if it made me laugh, it was going to make other people laugh. So I just had to start trying to, once again, get this story into the right hands. It took 4 years. It took 4 years of getting it to Ed Helms. He was the first person to get attached to the project. Then again, we got into Michael Dowse, the director who made Take Me Home Tonight and Stuber, for example. Taraji P. Henson eventually became attached to the project. And once you have that package, that took, by the way, 2 years of meetings to get through. I eventually was able to take it to every studio, and I took it to Sony, I took it to 20th Century Studios, Warner Brothers, and they all passed. But here's the thing, everyone thinks, oh, if someone said no, that means dead. No, you're never looking for no's. You're looking for that one yes. And my one yes came from Netflix. And Netflix gave me the yes. A year passed when I was thinking, man, they bought the movie. Are they going to make the movie? And then I got another call saying, hey, we're going to greenlight this thing and we're going to start shooting it, and are you going to be there on that day? And of course I'm there every single day of the week. So by the time that movie came out, it was 2020. It was the first week of April, which of course ended up being COVID. And everyone is home, and we were the number one movie at the same time that Tiger King was the number one television show on Netflix. We were the number one film on Netflix. And that's all luck, when it comes to what day your movie gets released and how the world is willing to receive it, all comes down to just pure luck. But at the same time, it was 4 years, 5 years of me manifesting this idea that I knew how to get a movie sold and made, right? Even though I really didn't. I just knew that at the same time, I wasn't going to stop until I got to a place where I made a movie for myself, right? And, the movie was made by lots of creators, but there was only one person on that film who was a person of color from the city of Detroit about a movie about a black kid with a white dad in Detroit. So it was my experience that in the day attached to this story and wanted to see this story get told. And eventually it did. And then I got a call for Father Stu after that because Mark Wahlberg at that point, I had been interning for him for 2 years. Damien, I remember one time we were on the phone together, or we were driving together actually, and I got a call from Mark, and he was giving me advice because I was telling him at the time, hey, I really like coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I really have this script that I want to sell. And how can I get this thing? And this is, by the way, having people around you who are great mentors and are willing to help you. Mark Wahlberg is a genuine person. So Mark Wahlberg took time out of his day, a very busy day, to help a 24-year-old figure out how to sell his script to the next guy, you know? So when he saw that I was able to get my movie made like I wanted to, he called me because he said, hey, I have a movie that I've been trying to make even, and I can't get it made. How do I get this thing produced? Jordon, can you help me produce it? And that was Father Stu. And that was his passion project for 9 years. 9 years he sat on that script. And what it was is he wanted it to get made with David O. Russell. He wanted it to get made with the greatest artists that he had already been working with, but they had their own things that they wanted to get made. And so, what I'm going to tell every other actor or creator out there is that if there's something you really want to see get made, you have to go out and make it. Someone's not going to come up and say, hey, guess what? I think your idea is the greatest idea in the world. Here's all the money in the world to help you make it. You got to go find that cash. You got to go find that talent. You got to go find that director. You got to go find that crew. Even if you have to make it for $20,000 and you have to, drive Uber for 8 months at a time and shoot on the weekends, by the time you're done, you will have that movie that you were hoping to create. And guess what? You're now one step closer to making the next movie. That's it. We're always just trying to make something now so we can move on to the next one too. So just make it for yourself more than anyone.
And you've got to do it. You've got
You
to
have
make
to.
it happen.
You have to do it.
So Father Stu happened after the comedy in Detroit. What was the name of that film?
Coffee and Kareem.
Oh,
Coffee.
that was Coffee and Cream. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So very lucky in that regard.
Again, I'm speechless, man. That's just such a cool story. I there was one moment I think I was 21 and I was riding an old steel frame Fuji 10-speed bicycle from the 80s, had a shirt open, bare chest. I'm going down Boylston Street and I'm riding no hands, backwards cap. I'm just a kid in the city, and I see a Bentley and the top is coming down. It's a Bentley convertible. And I'm like, I wonder who's got a Bentley on Boylston. And it's Mark Wahlberg. And I look over at him and I give him one of these, one of these man nods, right? And he gave me one back. He looked at me and went, can't imagine having a phone call. It's when we get
He
around people, like you said, great mentors.
he's one of the most inspirational individuals I've ever met. And the biggest reason why is the most important one. And if you ask him, is that he has changed and become a better person in his life. Who he was when he was a kid is not who he is as an adult. And he had to go through a lot in his life to transform into the person that he is today that we see on screen all the time. The other big thing that I love about him is that he does not take that for granted. Because he does not take that for granted, I've worked with a lot of actors. Once again, I've seen a lot of actors. I was John Krasinski's assistant. I was Anthony Mackie's assistant. Um, I've worked with George Lopez. I've worked with just all around the world. I've gotten very lucky with the people that I've met. I've been very blessed in that regard. Mark Wahlberg is the only one who stops in the middle of a scene to take a photo with a stranger because they're a fan of him. Because he understands that life does not guarantee you these people will come and support you forever. So if they've come this far to support you, he's not going to take that for granted. He's going to show you the same love back. And that's the difference. A lot of people just want to work, they want to put their head down, they want to show up to set, and they want to leave. Very respectful. I can totally understand that. It's professionalism at its best. At the same time, understanding that there are those who are coming and spending not just their hard-earned dollar, but their hard-earned time to watch your project, you got to be respectful to them. You have to be appreciative of that fact because it's a real blessing. And it's once again, not a lot of us are lucky enough to have that experience. And, you have to really be grateful for the audience that we're able to, to have with them.
That's the movie star. He comes in, does his work, but then he gets to, because again, like he sees hundreds, millions of people, but that little boy that sees him is like, oh, and you get to, again, it's that planting the inspiration. fostering the next generation. That also shows a great discipline of mind to be present. Because you go, I'm working, but it's like this kid, hey buddy, what's going on? How are you? What's your name? Mike. Hey Mike, nice to meet you, Mark. And it's like that, you don't know how that drop adds to the overall ocean. You know, and it's those, we call them small moments. That shouldn't be called small. They're isolated moments that can transform an entire life. Because you know, you get that one, like Wahlberg, he gave you a nod, JJ, and you still remember it like that. And that's, you didn't have to do that, but that's cool. And that, again, that like adds to the craft of living a beautiful life to some respects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kindness goes a long way. You know, kindness goes a very long way. I've heard a lot of stories from people who will say, I'll never work for this person again, right? In that regard of like the kindness wasn't given and thus I'm never giving it back. But at the same time, more importantly, what you hear is, I can't wait to work with these people again, right? Which is why you end up calling those people back, those actors that you love to work with, that director, that writer, those collaborators that in the day, you know, you can rely on and lean on when it's necessary, you know? And this is, by the way, going back to the authenticity part. If you trust one another, of course you're going to call each other back, right? You can trust that this person's going to really kind of come in and do you something solid. And they're not going to do it because, you know, there's no malicious obedience necessary. It's only with the intent to help you and, you know, help each other make something wonderful.
Help each other make something wonderful. And haven't we just done that today? I feel like this is the best podcast we've recorded so far. And that may be my bias because I've been a TV and film addict since I was about 4 years old. And I had a little twist knob UHF, VHF, black and white, 13-inch television in my bedroom that my mom didn't want me to have in my bedroom, but I had to have it anyway. Staying up late, watching Seinfeld or The Simpsons. And oh man. Well, I think they're calling my flight. I'm here in San Jose, Costa Rica, about to head back to Miami. This has been more than an enlightening conversation. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, Jordon Foss. You're an incredible human. And is there anything you'd like to shout out? Anything upcoming? Anything you're working on now that you're looking forward to? Or shout out your social media or how people
Yeah,
can
you
find
know,
you?
I've got my first feature film as a director that is coming out hopefully in the next year and a half. That's Black Spines. We're in post-production now. Um, can't wait to show everybody, you know, one of my experience, you know, as well as a teenager and putting that story out. When I wrote the film, I wrote it with my dad and I took his ghost story and made it into my reality. And that's a great example of, you know, I've written a lot of scripts, but the one I really wanted to make the most was the one that I felt really came from me. And, you know, when you go back out there, you know, everyone listening, just remember, keep making it for yourself and deliver it, you know, as Damien says, execute, you know, you got to execute on your own ideas and make it happen for yourself.
Well said. And again, I told you this was going to be a good one, JJ. Jordon, absolute pleasure. Every time we talk, man, I'm inspired. So more power to you. And thank you again for being a part of our podcast.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you,
And
guys.
everybody out there, keep growing and find us on YouTube and on Instagram. And we'll be on other channels soon. Thanks again and have a great day.
See you guys.